We are now joined on the line by presidential spokesperson, that's Alfredo Hengari, via the phone, just to talk to us about this particular issue. Dr. Hengari, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for making time for us this morning, Dr. Ndadi. Let's just get into it. Yesterday, you did release an opinion piece in which you took somewhat of a dig at the media for failing to understand the importance of the president's traveling. Now, just to start on that, where is the line drawn between the media keeping the president accountable, for doing what he has to do, and telling them, while essentially off from questioning pertinent issues?
Well, I think I should express my extreme disappointment with the manner in which even just your previous colleague introduced the topic. She spoke about globetrotting. She spoke about frequent travels. It shows that we are no longer in journalism. We are being fed opinions by journalists. They are no longer about facts. They are no longer about truth-telling. They are just out there to feed the public their opinions and their biases. And that is not what quality journalism is all about. We explained several times that the president travels on the basis of demands out there. The president just doesn't travel for leisure. The president travels because he's invited to very important meetings where the future of this country is also decided. Now, can you imagine Namibia being absent when the future of Namibia is being decided upon by others? We have many challenges in this country, issues that are not of our own making, climate change, resulting in droughts, resulting in many other adverse consequences, pandemics that have affected this country for the past 2 years. Now, if an AU summit is to discuss those issues, should Namibia be absent? Now, just think about this. The president at the AU summit, there are about 50 heads of state and government. Are they all stupid to be there? These are questions that journalists must ask themselves. These are basic questions.
Dr. Ndadi.
At the UN General Assembly, let me just finish. At the UN General Assembly, there are over 100 heads of state and government participating in that summit. Are they all stupid? So we need to move away from some of these very banal conversations about the activity of the president. We need to move away from them and focus on essential aspects of governance. It's one thing to say, but in 2019, the president, there's this investor who committed to come to Namibia. How far are we with those projects? That's the type of accountability that is necessary. But to talk about globetrotting, frequent flying, without any comparison, and that's the sad part of this thing, there's no basic research that is being carried out about what even a neighboring country, a neighboring country's president is doing, how many travels relative to the president of Zambia. I mean, these are basic things that journalists ought to do, compare at least before you talk.
Dr. Hengari, I just have a quick intermittent question there, right? By definition, the word globetrotting means the action of traveling widely around the world. And if the president is traveling, to get investment,
he's not traveling widely. He's not traveling widely. That's your opinion. You are not taking facts.
The Namibian listed how many? The Namibian listed this morning. The Namibian listed this morning how much the president has traveled this year alone. But that's besides the point. The question that I have, that's besides the point. The question that I have is why do you take offense to the word?
No, because you need to stop airing your opinions and call them journalism.
Okay, Dr. Ndadi, I think the major
journalism
bone of contention
must be factual.
here, Dr. Ndadi, the major bone of contention here isn't that the president is flying all over the world to various different places for reasons that some Namibians really want to know, but it is that there seems to be a failure by the presidency to account for at the very least tangible results and feedback of the president's travels. A comparative analysis of Namibia and, for instance, neighboring Zambia shows a vast difference, with Zambia getting signed deals that are being implemented, while in Namibia, all journalists and people on the ground as well, they just feel like they're getting promises from the presidency. So with that, the promises that the president comes back from these trips and says that we have secured this, but we haven't seen anything tangible.
I do hope that you took time to read the release we issued yesterday. Because in that release, we are listing no less than 7 items that have been achieved over the past maybe 10 months. You know, the president was in Qatar recently. Second invitation by the Emir of Qatar in less than 6 months. Do you know what Qatar is in terms of development? Do you know what Qatar is as an economy? I don't think that journalists in this country get to those basics. I don't think that they understand the essence of diplomacy, bilateral relations, and what countries, especially a developed country like Namibia, can benefit from that. Qatar has expressed interest to invest in our leisure and hotel industry. As I speak to you now, the government of Qatar, through a private equity fund, invested hundreds of millions of Namibian dollars into Safari Hotel, which was aging infrastructure. That infrastructure will be renovated. That infrastructure will employ more Namibians. Your brothers, your sisters will be employed there. And it's because of the relations that the President Geingob is fostering with the Emir of Qatar. The Emir of Qatar is coming to Namibia. Qatar Airlines flies into Namibia, started to fly back into Namibia. Why? Because Namibia is also doing certain things. Because the relations between Namibia and Qatar are becoming solid, so they have confidence in our economy. Now, when that airline lands at Hosea Kutago, it brings in tourists, it brings in businessmen. They employ your brothers, they employ your sisters, they employ your cousins. It's how you need to look at some of these things. Instead of taking this banal approach of sensational headlines, there's nothing novel about traveling. Nothing.
But Dr. Ndadi, is it really wrong of journalists to ask these questions and to write these stories purely simply based on the fact that they just want to hold the president accountable? I think
accountability is something else, Chief.
But that is what journalists are doing, Dr. Ndadi.
No, they are not doing that. They are not doing that. You have comments, have unhelpful comments being made about the president engaging in routine activities in line with his duties. Let me just share something with you. Before, last week the president was at the Commonwealth, right? The 26th Commonwealth heads of government meeting in Kigali. The president was with over 30 heads of the government, all their representatives at the Commonwealth. Now, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, was also at the Commonwealth. After the Commonwealth, do you know he went to? He went to Germany for the G7 meeting. That's how heads of government, heads of state operate. The president of Botswana, before he came to the Commonwealth, do you know where he was? So compare. Do that basic research of comparing what neighboring countries are doing and where they're doing those things, because they want to remain competitive. So if we want to remain a country that's in backward terms, we're not going to go anywhere. Development will not take place in this country. If these are the conversations that we want to have as Namibia, this country will go nowhere. Just go and look at the calendar of President Emmanuel Macron of France. Just go and look at his calendar. And ask yourself the question, why That's a wealthy country. Still, the president of that country believes that it's important for the West France to be heard at platforms where it matters, because it's key to the survival and the development of France. These are questions that you as journalists must ask yourselves.
And then perhaps for the benefit of our listeners, if you could give us, just an account of what some of the trips that the president has undertaken have achieved thus far.
But I've just shared with you.
You've shared a few.
The green hydrogen. Okay, let me just share with you. I mean, I'll go further.
Okay.
The issue of green hydrogen, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of interest in Namibia because of green hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's $1 billion industry that is emerging. And we are one of the early movers in that sense. That's one. Two, when the president was in Kigali just a few days ago, the president had a bilateral meeting with the president of Botswana, where the president of Botswana committed to increase volumes of imports and exports via the port of Walvis Bay. You know what that means? It means more jobs for your sisters, more jobs for your brothers, more for your cousins, and economic growth as well. Because when the port of Walvis Bay increases its volumes, the benefits for Namibia are obvious. I don't think we need to be rocket scientists to understand some of those things. We communicated that with you as well, transparently. So these are basics, colleagues, that we also need to get to. The moment we start to talk about those things, then potentially, I don't think that we'll be having some of these conversations. Now, when the president of the Republic of Namibia is invited to press for the Oceans Summit, Namibia is a developing country. We are one of the few countries sitting on the ocean panel. In fact, President Geingob was amongst the first to be invited. Why? Because of the manner in which Namibia is managing its oceans. Now, should we be absent from those conversations? Does it make sense to you that we are absent from those conversations? Where the future of the oceans is discussed, and a country with a vast ocean is absent. Does it make sense to you? Should we be absent? The president of the Republic of Namibia was invited by President Macron. Is President Macron stupid to invite the president of Namibia? Ask yourself, why is Namibia invited? So you don't ask yourself these questions. That's the sad. You don't. So in that sense, you cannot have serious conversations because we want to remain at the banal level of a trip. And that's not how a country talks about its future. I think it's actually demeaning of ourselves to have some of these conversations. They are not worthy.
So then, go ahead, finish.
These are conversations that don't speak to the quality of the republic we should build.
Now,
honestly, they don't.
With these various examples that you're giving us, I think, as John Collin pointed out earlier, is that the point of contention is the tangible results of all these things that you are explaining, right? Let's take, for example, the recent presidential trip to Dubai, which has been touted to create business links. But there's very little business engagement, at least from what we can see, between our country, and this destination. So what benefits did Namibia actually accrue from a trip like that, for example?
But I think actually you are also once again exposing the level of ignorance about relations between Namibia and the United Arab Emirates. And even your understanding of an expo. At an expo, you have over 150 countries participating in an expo. Now, let me tell you now, a number of heads of state and government visited their pavilions. Did you do that research? The answer is no. Because only looking at things from here, you don't know what is happening outside the borders, outside this country, in the world. Expos have been there for maybe over a century now. Countries participate, and it's not the first. We've only been independent for 32 years. But what I'm telling you now is that, in fact, the volume of trade between Namibia and the United Arab Emirates has been increasing. Our largest trading partner in the Gulf is the United Arab Emirates. So the president had a meeting with Sheikh Al Maktoum, the Prime Minister and Vice President of the United Arab Emirates. Now, go and look at that country. Do you think they developed because they had an insular approach to government, to foreign policy? No. They went all over the world and pitched their country. So now that's one level of the activities of the president. There's another level that's equally important. And that's what in political sense, they call it high politics. Now, it's the politics of the AU summit. It's the politics of the UN summits. Come on, please. Let's have serious conversations about issues affecting Namibia. Let's discuss those issues. Let's discuss those issues that are taken on there, as opposed to us talking about a banal thing like a trip.
Dr. Ndadi,
none of you, as you're preparing that article, would even bother to say, let's compare Namibia to Botswana, let's compare Namibia to Rwanda, let's compare Namibia to Senegal, countries that are aspirational, countries that want to do well.
Dr. Ndadi,
you didn't do that.
Dr. Ndadi, for the benefit of our listeners, how often does the president engage in meetings with other heads of states or other countries generally via this recent trend that we've seen of virtual meetings, which is a cheaper form as opposed to traveling physically? Just take us into that confidence of how often the president does do this.
If and when the president takes calls from other heads of state and government, the president makes calls to other heads of state and government. That's an activity for head of state. Now, there are summits that are virtual, hybrid. The president has participated on several occasions in meetings that are hybrid, where he says, no, I will not go. I will participate in because there's a hybrid format, and others don't have that hybrid format. The Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali recently didn't have a hybrid format. It didn't. So I think we need to get into the basics of trying to understand how the world works and why some countries are successful. The Prime Minister of Singapore was in Kigali, Rwanda. Do you think it's because he's stupid? Singapore is a very successful country with among the highest per capita income globally, but he was in Kigali. And other things that we need to think about before we come up with some of these meaningless headlines and conversations.
And, what we listened to earlier was just some analysts, giving their opinion on the president's travels, and some of them saying that the president needs to give more attention to the challenges faced by the country domestically rather than traveling. So what is your response to this view?
I think, honestly, as an analyst, I think there's a bit of seriousness that is expected and rigor. Now, just count the number of days that the president had spent on these activities, which are equally important for our economic development. They're important for economic development. Now, as an analyst, so you think that when the president is at an investment summit, when the president is at the Commonwealth Heads meeting, he's not dealing with Namibian problems? Please. So I think one would expect more from analysis, honestly. Because whatever the president is doing, wherever he is, the problems of Namibia are being treated. I just shared with you now. It was in Kigali where President Geingob and President Masisi agreed. The port of Walvis Bay will become a strategic port for the government of Botswana. Now, as an economist or as an analyst, isn't that dealing with Namibia's problems? When the president is in Brest for the Ocean Summit. Isn't the Namibian president dealing with Namibian problems by articulating Namibia's vision of the oceans, sustainability? Please, guys. And do you know, at the Ocean Summit in Brest, there are other heads of state and government, the president of Portugal, the president of Ghana, the president of Tanzania. All these people, when they converge and meet at these summits, is it because they don't understand how the world works? I think we need to ask ourselves some of these fundamental questions. And these are people who are there because they've been voted by citizens. Now, we as citizens, when we agree that we elect heads of state, participate in global affairs, are we saying we as citizens, we don't understand? I think we need to start to think deeply about some of these matters. Serious, and we are taking them lightly.
Dr. Ndadi, as I mentioned earlier, I think, journalists are writing these articles, asking these questions, particularly to explain to the general public, how often it is the president travels, what he travels for. And there is a worry, especially on the ground, and some analysts raise that as well, that sometimes most of these trips incur many, many costs. Of course, traveling isn't cheap. We all know that. So people on the ground are asking many questions. For instance, how much in S&T does, is spent on these trips, and how much of that can be cut by either not traveling at all or sending a smaller delegation.
No, the President Geingob in particular travels with very small delegations. I can assure you that. And we've been transparent about this. Now, honestly, you want your radio station to discuss the S&T of the head of state.
These are questions that people are asking, Dr. Ndadi.
It's not people. It's your opinions. You get, some of you like taking your opinions, and then you are saying people are asking those questions.
But we heard that
just like
an analyst was asking that question.
Just like you.
An analyst was asking that question, Dr. Ndadi.
Namibian just like you. An analyst, come on. If an analyst ask questions about
an analyst is a citizen of the country, Dr. Ndadi, and he has a right as well to hold the president accountable.
Honestly, these are small questions. President Biden was in Germany the other day. He was in Europe on several occasions. I didn't see any American journalist asking how much did President Biden get in S&T.
This, of course, Dr. Ndadi, is particular to the Namibian context.
Come on, please.
The people are asking this as Namibians, not as Americans. They're not asking these questions as Americans, Dr. Ndadi.
Because we are not, Namibia is not special in terms of how it should be governed as a country.
That's fair and well, Dr. Ndadi, that's fair and well, but we cannot be comparing ourselves to other countries when we have our own issues.
To be excellent, you as journalists must also compare yourselves to others for all of us to raise our quality and for all of us to develop this country.
Go ahead.
We have to compare ourselves. There's no way a country can develop if it does not compare itself, if it does not adopt best practice elsewhere, and it applies to all of us.
Dr. Ndadi, I will agree with you 100%.
Journalists.
You are absolutely right there. But the Namibians are asking these questions because they experience Namibian issues, they experience Namibian conversations and have Namibian
Botswana doesn't have those issues, Rwanda doesn't have those issues.
Sure, Dr. Ndadi, but we are talking about this in a Namibian context. These are Namibian citizens asking these questions.
Okay, now, let's look at a developing country like Botswana, a neighbor. Right? Just go and look at the external missions of President Masisi in the past few months. Botswana, neighboring country, you didn't do that. Go and look at South Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa was recently just a few days ago, he was in Germany at the G7. The G7 is not an investment summit. They speak about issues of in the world. South Africa was there. Why do you think he saw it necessary to be there? Ask yourself a question. The wealthiest countries are there in Germany discussing. Now, apparently, Namibia should not participate in global affairs. Really? What type of conversations are we having? What are we saying about ourselves?
Dr. Ndadi, I don't think that is what Namibians are worried about particularly.
No.
Namibians are worried about tangible results.
There's a tendency of people building their own opinions and making them national. Your opinions. Opinion article. But don't tell us you're giving us reports about issues when it's merely opinions that you're expressing and bias, unhelpful bias. No, we need to develop this country. We need to focus on matters that are key to our development.
That's all.
Some of these things are not helpful, colleagues.
That's okay. That's all fair and well, Dr. Ndadi. One final. I see we're running a bit out of time. I have to ask you this final question. When you say journalists are crafting their opinions into articles, can you perhaps just reference that for me?
No. I think you see when at the Qatar Economic Forum, there were journalists there from Bloomberg.
Okay.
And the line of questioning, the line of interrogation, you can see that it's about getting the facts from the newsmakers. But I think there's a tendency in this country of opinion journalism being on the rise. We are no longer getting facts through articles. We are getting opinions and bias of people.
Where have we seen that, Dr. Ndadi?
For example, just a few minutes ago, this topic is being introduced. Presidents Geingob, globetrotting, frequent travels. Really?
But my colleague gave the definition of globetrotting.
Those are
Dr.
opinions.
Ndadi.
They are not based on facts. These are opinions of someone. And the sad part is the colleagues didn't even take time, as I said, to compare or even to look at what is the number of days that President Geingob had spent outside this country relative to the number of days that he spent in this country. That's the reflection that is necessary. Then we can arrive at certain conclusions, all of us, and say, wait a minute. In fact, when you look at it, the president for the first half of this year, for about 50% of his time, he was outside the country. Then we have a problem. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, that is not the case. So your case is very thin.
Dr. Ndadi, we do appreciate you making time for us this morning and engaging us on this particular issue.
Thank you.
Do enjoy your day.